Looks like we are live. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the second session of the World Staffing Summit Technology Day. My name is David Francis. I'm the Vice President of Research. For those of you that were on the opening session, you know who I am. For those who haven't met me, I'm based here in California. Talent Tech Labs, research and advisory firm focused at the intersection of talent and technology. Kind of exclusively focused on how staffing firms and large corporations can leverage technology to transform their business. Excited you can join us today. Our session is titled Disruption or Opportunity, the Platformization of Staffing. And again, for the folks that were just on the opening session, we had like a kind of an extended segment on this topic, trying to set context for the conversation that we're going to have today. Our hypothesis is that the rise of online labor markets and staffing platforms is both a threat and an opportunity, and there's a variety of ways that staffing firms can react or play. And so what we've done with this session is we've got a couple of companies that have built platform businesses in different sectors and scaled those and had phenomenal success. And we've got a staffing executive as well who's had some of these conversations around and actually worked with some of these systems in the staffing business. And so we're going to have kind of two sides of the conversation around, what are the opportunities here, the different ways that companies can play, and what might you do? A couple rules of the road. Yeah, you've got kind of open Q&A. So I'm going to kind of seat the conversation, but would love it if you all could contribute questions as well. I'll start by introducing our panel here. We have Yong Kim, who is the founder and CEO of Winola, on-demand marketplace for hourly workers. We have Matt Pierce, who's the founder of Trusted Health, a platform for travel nurses, and Ralph Henderson, formerly an AMN executive, who's currently a operator in private equity. And I think let's do kind of an extended introduction if you all could, and it would be great to for Matt and Yong, if you could talk a little bit about your businesses, kind of what they are and what you do, how they were built. And Ralph, you could talk a little bit more about your background and kind of your relation to this topic. That would be great. Maybe we'll start with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, David. So this is Yong. Really excited to be here. So we are a labor marketplace that's connecting companies with workers through our software technology. We primarily focus on the light industrial commercial staffing space. And the way we came up with a solution, just for full disclosure, I don't have any staffing background. I never came from the HR background, but back in 2013, I spent some time with a team at Coca-Cola, especially on their frontline operations. So I spent a lot of time shadowing and working with a team at their warehouses, supply chain, merchandising operations, and logistics. And while spending some time there, I noticed that one of the problems that they were faced with operationally was just the constant ups and downs of the staffing needs at the frontline level. So, for example, at their warehouses, at any given day, there will be anywhere between 5 to 20 shortfalls in terms of the staffing level. And whenever they were faced with worker shortage, they would be scrambling. And as you know, Coca-Cola is a huge company, one of the largest companies in the world. They have strong relationships with many staffing companies like Randstad, Adecco. But whenever things like this would happen, even the big staffing companies like Randstad and Adecco couldn't really address the issue. So when I saw that this was happening at Coca-Cola and no one could really solve this staffing shortage issue that were happening on a daily basis, I became really interested in the problem and started talking to companies outside of Coca-Cola, small, large, medium, different verticals, and realized that this mismatch between companies having the need for workers and then workers needing jobs, but somehow two sides were not finding each other. It became really fascinating to me. So, thought about ways to solve this problem using technology, and through that effort, Winola was born. So really excited to share more about the story and how we differentiate. But that's kind of the background of Winola.
That's excellent. I appreciate that. Great. And Matt, why don't we shift to you?
Yeah, thanks, David. And first and foremost, just appreciate the opportunity to be here. Really excited. My name is Matt Pierce. I'm the co-founder and president at Trusted. Trusted Health is a platform, and we're on the mission to help people everywhere get care. And the way that we execute on that is really to optimize the world of staffing for healthcare. And so, as David alluded to, our starting point was really to build a digital platform to connect travel nurses with opportunities across the country. And as some of you may have seen, we actually launched a platform called Trusted Works, which is a platform for healthcare facilities to optimize their, really their staffing model. And that not only focuses on contingent labor and travel nurses, but that also optimizes their internal staff with shift optimization and distribution. And so we launched that here recently, which is exciting. Just a little bit of background on myself. I grew up in the world of staffing. I started my career at Tech Systems, an Allegis Group company, and made my way up in the organization into the executive leadership program. And at that point, really identified the wave of technology that was coming towards the world of staffing, and just saw it as an opportunity to be at the tip of the spear. And, really kind of overnight moved from Chicago, at my traditional staffing job, to Silicon Valley, and trying to just learn as much as I can. And somehow, luckily, ended up at a startup that was called Developer Auction, and ended up transitioning to Hired.com, where I just learned a tremendous amount of how to build a product and the trials and tribulations of a startup. And I think most importantly, probably met my co-founder Lenny, and from there, Lenny's mom is a nurse, and so she was kind of constantly asking, "Hey, healthcare is struggling. Like, we need a staffing solution that actually works for us." And around that time, actually, my brother suffered from medical error, and it kind of, all of the light bulbs and dots connected for me on how important staffing is to ultimately delivery of care. And so Lenny jumped on the ledge and was like, "Hey, I'm starting a company. Are you coming with me or not?" And so I had my Jerry Maguire moment and joined him. And we, set off to start Trusted Health. And that was about a little less than 5 years ago. And so it's been a heck of a ride, and excited to, chat more about our journey.
Brilliant. And Ralph, why don't you tell us about your background, kind of where you've come from and what you're doing today.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for including me as well today, David. It's been a great week for the World Staffing Summit. I've been about 25 years now in the staffing industry. I actually started my career at Norel, and then became part of Spherion, now part of Randstad. I was there about 12 years. And then I spent about 13 years at AMN Healthcare, where I ran various healthcare divisions there. Kind of the platform or tech part of my story actually starts a little bit with Yang's. I was a vendor to Coca-Cola, and had to work on their system called KO Needs. And at the time, there was some very basic applicant tracking systems around, but KO Needs was a slightly, an improvement on a tool that actually included the customer interface on it. And I remember thinking at the time, boy, if we could ever add the candidate side of this experience, and we could make it smooth and work, effectively, there would be, some real opportunities there. From there, kind of flash forward, I got kind of on the MSP VMS bandwagon. It's part of companies that develop several different technologies to accelerate the placement of people in MSP marketplace. And then, more recently at AMN, we did implement a mobile app, which we worked up with actually Young's firm on when they were, a very early startup, to provide per diem nurses on a daily assignment basis. So those of you that know, per diem nursing is very much like industrial. The requests come in at the last minute. You have to contact thousands of people at once and deploy them out to work. So it was a very effective way to get into the business without starting from scratch. So partnered with them to do that. We also had developed an internal tool for travel nursing. So we kind of treated those two markets separately.
Brilliant. Well, welcome all three of you. The way we're going to kind of, I think, I'll kind of structure this conversation is one kind of on some dynamics on, what's driving the platform model and what's driving kind of the growth in your businesses, and then we'll shift a little bit to kind of the staffing point of view and ways to play, and then we'll kind of see what kind of cohabitation might look like. And first question I just want to ask, Yong or Matt, I'm curious to get your thoughts here. Like, in your view, like, what's the difference between what you all are doing and a traditional staffing agency?
Yeah, maybe I can hop in here first. I think there's kind of two ways of thinking about it, and they probably converge in the middle because it's like there's a spectrum of an answer here. And what I mean by that is I think there's an answer that is there is no difference. And because the job to be done ultimately for us is to connect the right talent to the right opportunity in the most cost-effective, time-efficient manner, right? And so I think the job to be done is the same. But the other side of the equation, the other answer is that we're fundamentally different because we're a technology company. And so we're a technology company that executes on the job to be done, which is staffing. And so we are fortunate in many ways where Young and myself and our respective companies started on the foundation of building in a technology first with a technology first mindset. And so we have the opportunity to create a tremendous amount of efficiency and digital solutions to execute on that. And so it depends on which way you answer the question, but ultimately we're operating in the same arena, and we're trying to solve a problem for our customers, which are job seekers and those who want to engage them.
Yes, I'll chime in here and add a few more points. I absolutely agree with Matt. The set of problems that we're trying to solve is the same. The results that we try to get to, the goal, they're all same, but the approach is quite different. So I'll give some examples on that. So when you look at the structure of the traditional staffing agencies, it's largely based on headcounts of recruiters, field operations people, account managers, and that makes up for about 80-90% of the workforce within staffing companies. If you look at tech marketplaces or platforms like ours, that structure, formation of the team is quite different. So we have more than 30% of the workforce, so basically internal team at Winola, consisting of research and development. So these are largely product managers, engineers, and proportionally, we have fewer sales or ops team members compared to staffing agencies. And at Winola specifically, we don't have a single recruiter, and recruiting is done all through technology and software platforms. So the way we approach it is we look at a set of problems that we're all trying to solve. And to solve that problem, with those problems, you can either approach from the tech first view or, human centric nature. And we tend to view from the world of, okay, can we solve this through tech? If we can solve through tech immediately, then can we eventually get there? And that has always been our approach. And the second part that I would say is when it comes to the worker side in particular, staffing, industry as a whole is still largely viewed as very much the customer or client centric, but on the worker side, we very much look at it as, what does it take for us to really win the mind share of, the broader set of hourly workforce that may not even be aware of the traditional staffing job opportunities. And to do that, we approach it in a very much like how the traditional the typical tech B2C type companies would approach. So like how the companies like TikTok or Instagram go out and acquire users, and we very much think about it from that way as well when it comes to worker acquisition. So I would say that those are two additional aspects to what Matt just shared.
Right, that's fascinating. It's speaking of that, can you if you're not if you don't have recruiters, what are kind of your like candidate growth or acquisition strategies? Like how do you get folks in the first place? Or are you guys at a scale now where you don't need to kind of acquire new candidates because you got so many that are already in the platform?
Yeah, we definitely want to continue growing and expanding our presence and mind shares. But typical acquisition channels are, we heavily rely on digital acquisition channels. So social media, other sorts of digital channels. And then we also rely on heavy referral. And the way we do referral is quite different from how staffing agencies would do. So it's app enabled. You click 2 steps, and then all of a sudden you can reach out to a very broad network of your friends and family members. And then there's a strong referral loop based on that. And then the last part is just words of mouth. What would happen is, let's say that you are not on Winola platform, and then you're working at a let's say warehouse, and then you all of a sudden see new faces at the place, and then you ask them, hey, haven't seen you. How did you get this job? And they say, I picked it up through Winola, and then they download the app, and then they start using the service. So there's a very strong kind of the network effect that's kind of built into it. So those are kind of the 3 primary channels that we rely on.
Got it. Fascinating. And you guys do have a sales force, I'm assuming, for going out and actually selling to clients.
Yes, on the client side, yes, we very much have the large sales force that go direct, but also there is the indirect pool that we have built within the system.
Got it. Okay. Any comments you want to add there, Matt or Ralph?
Yeah, I would jump in. I think they described very well the tech first approach, and that's firms like Trusted, Winola. That's where they've started, and they are migrating to become a platform that can serve all of their constituents. The traditional staffing firms actually start from a people first model, and then they use technology to optimize over time. And so they kind of the question is, can you get there as fast from this people first model and optimizing through technology, or are you better off going from technology first and then gaining your assets on the people side?
Yeah, that is the $1 million question. What is the answer? Do you have any? You took the question out of my mouth, man. What's the what is the answer, Ralph? Which is better? Which is what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think both approaches are very good and reliable. I mean, if you take a look at other industries, like ride sharing started tech first, but wiped out the taxi cab industry because they weren't thinking about that customer experience and all of that. So I think that's the big advantage that the tech players have, is that they have a lot of data. They understand their candidates probably better than many staffing companies do, and as a result, they built a platform that's very, very focused on them. The staffing first approach gives you a legacy that may in some ways hold you back, but in other ways, if you could shed it, you could move there. I don't think there's any option about whether or not a staffing agency needs to do this. I think it's probably going to become important for them to continue to thrive in the industry, just like it was for them to add ATS, get on the internet, understand how MSP works, all of these different changes that have happened. I think this is just the next one that's coming their way.
This is just an evolution of kind of already, and the place that they're coming from is just different than they don't need to. So I guess maybe this, Matt, I didn't want to cut you off. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add, or we might kind of shift gears a little bit.
I just one thing here that kind of like connects some dots between Ralph's and Young's point, which is I think when you think about the different customer cohorts, and when I say customer in this particular case, I'm talking about the candidate. When you think about those different cohorts, think about it in kind of the classic of like the crossing the chasm. You have like your innovators, you have your early adopters, your early majority, your late majority, and then your laggards, right? And what I mean by that is when they're onboarding onto your platform, some of them are not going to be those innovators and early adopters and like hop right in, build their digital profile, and be completely, touchless, right? And so I think the strong technology companies in this space understand where there's intervention from a human perspective, right? So we talk a lot about, and for the last 5 years at these staffing conferences, we've always talked about like kind of the recruiterless model. But the question is like we have a bad jobs problem from a staffing perspective, and that bad jobs problem is like nobody wants to just constantly be smiling and dialing and calling a bunch of candidates and getting hung up on. But if you have a candidate that shows intent and you're just helping them cross that line, we have a role in our organization that's called a nurse advocate. And that nurse advocate just is actually a nurse, and they meet the nurse along their journey to get them over the hump. And that is really kind of where they're at in that journey when you think about it from a crossing the chasm perspective. So I just wanted to connect some dots on where there might be some gaps for anybody in the audience there.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. So the somewhere in the middle, you basically just got two different approaches. Jill Rossi is asking, are either of you part of MSP programs? And if so, how's the experience been, not only in the placement, but does the MSP understand your value and support the solution? Jill, that's actually an excellent question. You, again, have taken a question out of my mouth, so thank you for doing that. Might be a good time to broach it. And so I know we've got some different opinions on participating in MSP programs. Matt, what's your experience been? Yolan, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I mean, my 2 cents here is MSPs in the travel nurse staffing industry have been like incredible partners to us. And getting out of the gates, what allowed us to tremendously grow was we just had a 100% maniacal focus on the travel nurse experience. And the demand side of our marketplace, or where the jobs came from, was 100% MSPs. So we plugged into those partners and we said, hey, look, we execute on the same job to be done that a staffing agency does. We're going to deliver travel nurses better and faster than anybody in the industry. That's our promise. And we're going to execute on that promise because we're taking a tech first approach. And we can help you deliver on your promise to your end customer, which was the hospital, right? And so we, for several years only operated as partners with MSPs, and it's been an incredible opportunity to have focus as a startup, which is really, really important in the early days. And so they've been great partners to us and still are.
So from our perspective, we took a different approach. So we do not work with MSP or VMS environment at all, because when we first developed our solution and started meeting with customers, it was very clear that what we were offering was viewed as something so different, right? So we would go to the customer and say, hey, I see that Randstad is not delivering 50% of the jobs that you're trying to fill. We're not asking a lot, just give us maybe 5% of what's not getting unfilled, and then we're gonna solve that problem for you like at the end of today. And oftentimes the reaction from the customer was, hey, hey, Young, you're a tiny startup. If Randstad cannot solve this problem, how are you supposed to solve this problem? And not only solve the problem, but you're saying that you can have the candidates by the end of the day. Like I just don't believe you. I don't trust you. And then I tried to show them the demo, and this is how it works. And then customers are like, this doesn't make any sense. Like I haven't even seen these candidates. So there was a very strong reaction and resistance from our customers to adopt a solution like Winola, because there was just no trust factor. So for us to, our realization was that for us to really evangelize the labor marketplace or platform like ours, we had to go ensure that the customers are fully educated. And then if we have a layer in between us and the customer through MSP and VMS network, customers would never change their behavior around how they adopt a solution like us. So it took a while for us to get going because we were going direct every single time. And oftentimes we would either be side by side with MSP, or we just targeted ones that didn't have the MSP relationship. So our current strategy is still to build our own and educate customers on why we're offering something that's fundamentally different. It may potentially supplement what they're using through MSP or VMS, but what we are proposing here is quite different. We may solve different types of problems or offer different value propositions, and that's been our strategy so far.
That's amazing, and you've had some success. Might have been pretty hard early days, but as I understand, you've been successful building direct kind of channel, your own channel, basically direct into clients to do some of this, which is scary if you're an MSP, and exciting if you're you. So want to talk about basically like what a staffing companies do here, right? So there's a few options. Ralph, I'm curious actually to hear kind of the story of, there was actually kind of some use between where you used to be at and Young. There's kind of a couple options for staffing companies. One is you can try to build something from the ground up, and another option is you find a company like a Winola or one of these other platforms that's kind of in a segment that you serve, and you see if you can broker some kind of strategic partnership, or maybe you acquire them. So I'm just curious, can you talk us through what that experience was like when you guys, lack of a better word, got into bed together?
Yeah. Our journey actually it predates our dealing with Young as well. Our board was kind of observing what was happening across the country with Amazon and Lyft and Uber and others, and they were really kind of started to think about what other matchmaking type businesses where there would be disrupted, and they put us as very likely to be disrupted early on in the process. So we were looking, way back, maybe 2010, at firms like it's Kupel, I think it was, in Switzerland, that was doing retail. There's another company in France, I think it was Brigade or something like that, that was doing it was deploying workforce for events, and so we were kind of looking at what was happening in other places, in other industries, and then that became kind of the burning platform for us. On the decision about whether to buy or build, there was no buy at the time. I think there are some options now where you can acquire third party or even white label software. Right. But that option didn't exist. So for us, it was could we buy somebody? I think we approached just about everybody in the on-demand staffing business to see if anybody wanted to sell. Nobody did. And so then we started working towards a partnership with Winola. We made an investment in them as well. We believed in the company. We believed in the management team. The board there was very successful in their past endeavors, and so and then we dug into the technology, and so we went that route. On the decision on whether to do that or build it yourself, I'm all for doing stuff in house, but I feel like unless you're a super technology mature staffing company, that it would be extremely difficult to build it yourself. So if you've had a product that's actually had consumer success before, maybe, but you might have had business to business success, but you may not have had business to consumer success. I would say it'd be very, very unlikely you could be successful. You kind of have to look at yourself on the continuum. Are we still a traditional staffing company, or are we becoming more of a tech provider? And where are you on that continuum might define whether you acquire, whether you rent or lease software, or you try to develop. But I'd shy most companies away from developing on their own.
Yeah, and the on the I mean, we're at a point now where at the time we've gone from one end of at the time there wasn't any companies FOIA license from. Now there's a plethora of them, and on the builder side, they might not have wanted to sell to you, but now a lot of these platforms are probably at a point where they'd be too expensive to buy, except if you're at the, even for the largest companies, that might be kind of out of the budget at this point. So kind of the partner or license. So speaking of that, I know there was there's a category of software which is basically replicated, what you all do, and is trying to, I guess for lack of a better word, arm the rebels and help staffing companies kind of, become more digitally native and have more of kind of a platform offering. Do you guys see that as like a competitive threat? Are you worried about that at all? And if not, why not?
Go ahead, Jan.
Just curious.
David, I just want to make sure I understand your question. So
I'm curious, for the other session that's going on right now is it's called like how to implement a deployment platform. And so it's Integrity Staffing, for example, talking about basically how they went and licensed a software and they're trying to develop these capabilities. Coming from, obviously, as we've already kind of talked about, a different starting place, right? But they're kind of moving towards solving the same problem, and they're trying to get more tech enabled to do that. And so I guess there's I'm curious about two things. One is just is how competitive do you see that? Is it a risk factor for you at all? And I guess in the future, basically, where does this go? Like where are we all platforms in 5 years from now?
So on the first question, I'm not too worried about it. What we have realized while building Winola is that even though the problem that we're trying to solve, so connecting companies with workers, and ensure that both sides are happy, just to make that happen, so from the moment the clients need certain amount of workers, and then all the way to workers getting paid on time, and then they come back to the job. Just between that time, like there are hundreds of things that can break along the way. So like, for example, a worker said, yeah, I'll show up at 8 a.m. And the worker doesn't show up. Like, how do you solve that problem? For whatever reason, the worker put the wrong, made a spelling or typo in the bank account, information, so that the worker's not getting paid on time. All these things, like there's so many things that can break, and the way we think about approaching every single problem that needs to happen, so that at the end of the day, two sides are matched and they're having an amazing experience. Like, we have to solve every single problem either through technology or operations. And when I think about how the traditional staffing companies approach using a Winola-like software to bring that experience, some of the things that need to happen are not happening. So, for example, the adopting a software solution like this is not a tool set. It's not like you buy a payment software and then all of a sudden like you start
using expense software.
Something like that, right? So what this means is that you, as a traditional staffing company, have to be okay with bringing a real change management. So, for example, one of the things that we work with other staffing agencies too, and one of the things that we are very clear with the staffing agencies is that, hey, once you adopt our solution, it would mean that you may have to close down, I don't know, hundreds of your branch offices, because the work that your team members at branch offices are doing are actually going to be done by the software. Are you okay with that? And oftentimes they're not okay with it. So then they deploy this expensive software. They're trying to get their team to adopt it. Somehow they fail at it, and it just becomes a shiny tool. So unless staffing agencies are really, really willing to take the next 18 months of the pain points of completely transforming the way they do their business,
right?
I think that there's a danger that, okay, we're going to adopt it and hope that this software solves the problem, but that's usually not the case. So So because of that, we're not too worried, whether it's the traditional staffing companies trying to build their own or, buy software solutions and then implement it in-house. So that's kind of our thesis.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You've done the work of making a marketplace, work, and that kind of goes unseen. You just see the front end of it, and you think you can buy the front end to make the whole thing work. Yeah,
you
it's a fascinating point.
All the nitty gritty details that are happening behind the scenes.
Right.
Oftentimes those are not well captured when you just buy a software solution.
Yeah. Matt, anything to add?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to touch on two additional points here. One is that, I think there's been several people who have chatted about this. I think, David, you had alluded to Mark Andreessen's quote, just to say that each kind of subcategory of job, and whether that be industry or even down to the specific job category, is it going to be verticalized? And so we think about nurses as like 20 million nurses globally, 4 million in the United States. When you talk about a nurse staffing company, plugging in a technology, it better be, focused. If you're trying to compete with those who are building technology staffing, products in the nursing space, it has to be really focused, because there's a lot of nuances, which, Yang alluded to, that make it really challenging to do that. So you're not just going to be able to plug in and make it happen.
Right. That whole multi-vertical challenge. That's the reason I think the growth has been more so on vertical platforms, because it's like the whole platform's optimized around all the specific nuances inside, all the workflows and stuff that comes up in that one particular, subsector. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
You have healthcare. It's like you have shift differentials, you have licensure, you have verification, you have all of, and that's just like a small hint of what it takes to connect the right talent with the right opportunity. And then I think, just to really put a magnifying glass on what Yang said, I came from the traditional staffing world. The biggest challenge to really making the digital transformation is the culture change in the organization. You're going to need to create a separate skunkworks team. You're going to need to create an environment that is like, a life or death environment. Like, if a startup isn't successful, they're not going to get money and nobody's going to have jobs. Are you going to create that environment in your, large staffing company? And that's the kind of way in which you get hyper productivity and hyper growth. That's why startups work and have done so for a long time. And so you have to create that culture change of innovation and disruption and high pressure in somewhat of an organic way. And that's really, really hard to do.
Right. Particularly in an environment where you've got, incumbent folks who have done stuff a certain way for so long. Did you run into any of that, Ralph, when you guys were deploying? Would you consider that partnership a success, or were there issues?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would consider it as a success, but I think we had the challenges that Matt and Yang are talking about, which is, we were using tech to enable our strategy rather than making our strategy tech. And so we did struggle a little bit, particularly at first. I think, over time, I think adoption rates, went up a lot. I think that had a lot to do with the candidates and the end user experience.
Right.
They were more comfortable working on their mobile device, and than getting a lot of phone calls and things like that. So in time, I think, right, that some of those businesses, will transition to be, kind of tech first, but it wasn't easy to do internally. I totally agree with what everyone has to say. I just feel like if you can get it, make it your strategy, then, you can do it that way. But just thinking of it as like another piece of software that enables an internal processes, you're almost
the wrong way to think about it. Yeah. Cool. So two other big picture topics I want to get here. The first is, speaking of, there's kind of an interesting dynamic came out when we were having our prep call, where there's kind of the big company, small technology company dynamic that happens, and it probably would be the same if it was even a small staffing company trying to partner with a a small, startup. And that is like, there's this incongruence between basically trying to meet the needs of a possible strategic partner in the staffing industry, and kind of also execute on your own kind of mission. Do you, maybe Yon, you want to articulate maybe some of the challenges that happened, kind of in the early days when you were, trying to execute against that? And I don't know, any advice for builders or staffing companies on your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's so we've met with a lot of large staffing companies over the years, and
Yeah.
Their boardroom discussion, definitely has this topic very much on their mind, right? Like, how do we innovate, how we do things within the company, or how do we adopt, new innovative technologies internally? And whenever I meet with them, and they approach us by asking like, hey, we want to partner with you, we want to adopt more technology internally. The question that we always get blocked on is, okay, let's say that the partnership becomes incredibly successful. What does the end company look like, right? Like, if you were to adopt a solution like this, then does your company look differently, or is this going to be just one of the Salesforce or Paychecks or type tools in your mind? And oftentimes there's the large companies have hard time answering what that really looks like. So then the next question is, okay, if a company like Randstad were to start from scratch today, so let's say that they forget everything that they have built in the last 50 years, and then let's say that they have to start from the scratch, like again, like what would then the company look like? So a lot of the fundamental questions that really drive the potential changes within the large companies, those questions are like really, really hard to answer, and then there's no strategy involved in it. So until that part is like very clear, either them approaching platform players to either partner or acquire, the probability of success is quite questionable. So as a result of that, I think it really goes down to the question of like, are you willing to take the risk of potentially foregoing a lot of the things that you have built in the last multiple decades? And if you're willing to take that take that risk because you believe that in the future you can actually see multiplier effect by fully adopting technology like this, then I think it could be like a wonderful strategy. But without willing to take that risk of losing what you have, I think it's a really, really tough one. I mean, that's my view. So I mean, there's numerous examples, right? Like Netflix, when they started as selling or renting out DVDs, and then they had to go from DVD business to streaming business. It was like an internally like a very, very tough decision to forego profitable DVD business, right? So but they made a change. So the question is like, are staffing companies like Randstad, Adecco, all the large ones, like, are they willing to do that? Like, are they willing to go from $20 billion of revenue all of a sudden to potentially maybe half of that, and all of a sudden losing all of their profits because they believe that in the next 10 years like they can come out even in a better place? I just don't know.
When their investors forgive them. Well, we've got Randstad on a panel later today, so I'll ask him exactly that, and we'll find out what he says. It's a brilliant point. And I think, Matt, you guys actually wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't even consider a strategic partnership with like letting another staffing company license your technology, or would you?
No, I mean, we work with other staffing companies. I alluded to it previously, such as we staff into MSPs. But no, we don't have a product in which allows other staffing companies to license our software. That's not something we've ever really considered.
Got it. So another strategy we've seen, and this seems to be kind of earlier days here, but it's actually pretty fascinating and quite honestly kind of exciting to see, is so normally the conversations revolve because of kind of the power dynamics of kind of startups versus the incumbent industry has been, oh, can we acquire one of these tech companies and power our business? But we've seen some, technology builders go out and basically part of their go-to-market or the client acquisition strategy is like going and buying small staffing companies that want to sell. And so, you guys both just raised pretty substantial amounts of money. Are you in the market to buy, staffing companies and use that as kind of an acquisitive client acquisition strategy and then get them onto the platform?
I think one way I can answer this is,
if you can't comment, that's okay. But I'm just
yeah. I think one way I can answer this without directly answering it is looking at like taking like a venture or private equity point of view on this, which is at the end of the day, you have to look at kind of like a CAC to LTV ratio, meaning a customer acquisition to lifetime value equation.
Yep.
And so, us as Trusted are going to look at what is the cost to acquire customers. And in this case, that could be either job seekers or healthcare facilities looking to use our technology. And, what is the lifetime value of those customers? And, there's several different ways in which you can execute on that job to be done. One way is to go out and build a sales team to, digitally acquire those customers, to acquire them by acquiring companies. And so I think Trusted's point of view is like, we as, intelligent, hopefully intelligent business people are looking at all different avenues on what's the best CAC to LTV ratio to make our business successful. And that's our point of view.
Very analytical way to look at it, Matt. You might have missed your calling as an analyst, or as a strategy consultant. Do you have a similar point of view or different point of view?
Yeah,
what are your thoughts
similar. It's very similar. So there's the unit economics, perspective that Matt alluded. So if it becomes a cost-effective channel, like one of the channels to acquire the clients and then the workers, then it could be an interesting strategy. I think the other angle is like, what is the adoption rate of your new technology going to be with the set of clients and the workers that you're acquiring, right? So if you let's say that you are looking at a potential acquisition target, it's a small staffing agency in a specific market that you want to get into, then you have to think about, okay, are you just acquiring a traditional agency and then you're letting it run as if it's the traditional way, or are you trying to transform that agency into the way you operate? And if it's the latter, then you have to think about how likely is this cohort of customers and the workers willing to adopt your way, and then what is that transition going to be like? If they're not willing to convert, then then there is a risk that you are actually like operating like a standalone traditional agency, and if that is the case, will there be a real synergy through the acquisition? So there are, theoretically it sounds it sounds like a logical step, but we definitely approach it in a both analytical and then adoption perspectives.
Right.
Yeah. One example here is I won't name any names, but there's an organization who is side by side building a sales and growth team and seeing what the cost per acquisition of customers is on that, and then they're like A/B testing a corp dev team and acquiring small local regional staffing agencies and seeing what the cost and conversion is of that. So that's just, I wanted to like paint that as an example to kind of back into the CAC to LTV unit economics view of it.
Right. Personally, I'm gonna be fascinated, I guess on all, like whether that, I'd be curious to see what the CAC to LTV is on an acquisition versus, hiring a sales team, go to market and try to do it. I know for the companies that haven't been successful in platform business, that's been one of the challenges, like selling, right? Like, you survived the hard times of customers being like, I don't get this. And, so like acquiring an agency might solve some of that because you've got the client base kind of, you're buying the client base, and you at least can hopefully help them get over that hurdle, right? So personally, I'm going to be curious how this develops, 2 or 3 years. And on that note, big question is what happens 2, 3, 5 years from now. You guys have, had an incredible run so far. Where do you go from here? Do you expand horizontally? What kind of does the future look like? And really, what does the future look like for the whole market, right? Like, what are you expecting kind of the competitive landscape to look like in like 3, 5 years from now? Any of you feel free to chime in.
Well, I'll jump in just from the staffing company perspective. I think in 3 to 5 years, you will see all of the majors, most of the mid-market companies will have some sort of a tech platform to enable that relationship between the candidate and the customer to be primarily digital. But I also think that some of the firms that started as tech only will also catch up. They'll be mid-market. They may even be in the large category by then, by the kind of the 5-year mark. So then I think that's where the competition will get super interesting. Right now I don't think anyone's super concerned. They all know it's going to happen, I think, but they aren't to the point yet where they think their days are numbered. So
right.
when they get their backs up against the wall, the big staffing firms have survived a lot. Right? You think about
right.
Monster and then the VMS industry and vendor neutral models and things like that. Staffing industries responded appropriately, and in often case, right, they hire from the tech industry to go run the staffing firm, so they get the change they need internally.
Right. Yeah.
So I think
I mean, for what it's worth, the industry is at like record levels of revenue right now, right? So so yeah. I mean,
right.
You can feel might feel tempting to be comfortable, but yeah.
As far as Trusted goes, we are laser focused on our mission, which is to help people everywhere get care. So what that means is we're laser focused in the healthcare space.
Yeah.
Our initial go-to-market was to build a digital staffing solution for travel nursing. And so we worked on that for, our first 3 years with even, nothing else, just that only. And over the past year, we've been focusing on Trusted Works, which is really a healthcare staffing platform for healthcare facilities. And that expands our capabilities from the demand side. So healthcare facilities can engage any healthcare professionals, nurses, allied healthcare professionals, et cetera, through a myriad of different agencies, Trusted Health, staffing solution not being the only one. And so that's a little bit of foresight into our expansion, throughout the healthcare category. So that's Trusted's point of view. And then, as far as the industry, look, I think, staffing in general is a laggard. Over 50% of the Fortune 500 companies from 2000 are no longer in the Fortune 500 because they haven't, really made the digital transformation. And I think staffing needs to look at themselves in the mirror and, start making those big, difficult decisions. As Young alluded to kind of bet the company on what the future looks like. And I think all of us would say there's a lot more digital solutions and tech platforms that are going to be at the top of the list in 5 years than there are right now. So I'm excited, to play our part in that.
And I'll add that, one thing that, as someone that's coming from no staffing and HR background, one of the biggest lessons that I learned, while building Winola in the last, 7-8 years is that staffing industry is just incredibly complex because we're dealing with humans. Like the end customers that we're serving are people, workers that where jobs are one of the most important things in their lives, and having the income opportunities is just critical part. And because we are dealing with such a critical part of the lives of humans, there are just a lot of complexity around it, unpredictability, related to human behaviors. And I think that's what makes the industry so exciting and open for more innovations happening. It's not just about connecting workers with companies, but innovations can happen around, benefits or how you pay them. Like nowadays, you hear about
It's a whole separate
pre-funding
conversation to have around that. Yeah.
Right. Yes, and background check and sourcing. I mean, there are innovations happening all different ways. So, our focus has always been serving the frontline, hourly workers that have not been, not felt like they had a voice and ears. So we want to continue focusing on, empowering the frontline workers, and we want to build solutions around, how to really have them feel like they have access to more things through Winola than everywhere else or anywhere else. So that's kind of what we are focused on doing and building in the next 5-10 years. But in the meantime, there will be a lot of new entrants coming in to solve various problems within the staffing industry, and we're really excited about that.
Phenomenal. It's been a great conversation. I want to thank all three of you. Incredible. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Young, and thank you, Matt. I appreciate this. We've had a bunch of folks like kind of giving shout outs here in the comment section. So wishing you both, actually all three of you, continued success. And with that, we will wrap up. And I will see everyone on the on the next session. We're going to talk about building a $1 billion business. Cheers, everybody.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.